Season 1, Episode 28 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. When you call my name, it's like a little prayer.
Welcome one and all to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I'm your host and redeemed killer, ready to spread the word of Lathander, Adam.
I'm your player who takes the faith side of clericism a little too far, Sarah.
And I'm your preachy heel bot, Matt.
Welcome to the show, guys. We just finished up Halloween. We finished a little adventure last night. I tell you, it's coming into November. The stress level is high. Got election day right around the corner, and I am just looking for some relief. And it's really great to be able to talk about tabletop role-playing games with everything that's going on out there. How are you guys feeling about things?
Confident.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, I'm ready.
You
I'm
sound
ready
confident,
to.
Sarah. You're like,
I am.
I'm confident.
You know, the rug was pulled out once or twice before, so I'm just kind of ready for this to be done. I just want to know the result. But now that it's here, I'm like, I don't know. My stomach tightens just thinking about all the ways in which something can go sideways.
I'm sure we'll win the ensuing civil war. Don't worry.
Yeah. Exactly.
Not to worry. It's only going to take about 3-4 weeks to get the results. So, just get used to that stomach clenching tightness because it's not going away anytime soon. But for right now, we're going to get into the topic for the day. Now that we've closed the book on Halloween and all the evil spirits, demons, and undead that plagued the land in the fantasy realm rather than the real world, the only natural thing is to turn to the bright side of things, the good side of things, the healing side of things. And that brings us to the cleric. Often an overlooked but surprisingly strong character class, the cleric has been a staple of any party for, forever. Matt, you're a grognard. How has the cleric class evolved through the various editions, and what do you think of their current iteration?
So, just as a kind of oldie reference, when I was DMing second edition, I could not get any of my players to play a cleric. And the reason for that is if you look at the early editions of first and second, the cleric really just started essentially as a heal bot and undead turner. Like that was their function. It's like, there's 20 skeletons. Do we have a cleric? No. All right, I guess we got to fight them. Or it's like, I'm down hit points. Someone needs to heal me. And so it was actually really boring to play the cleric in the older editions because you just sit there and you didn't have much weapon proficiency. I mean, you could wear. I think I remember correctly, you could wear armor, but your weapons kind of sucked. You could only use like a mace. It was like a mace bludgeoning weapons, and there's a quasi-historical reason for that, and that's because Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson were kind of very much obsessed with kind of this medieval trope, which was based on clerical canon law, which was that priests were not supposed to shed blood. And so in the Song of Roland and also the Bayeux Tapestry, you have portrayals of clerics with bludgeoning weapons, to keep their oath. And this was this is something of a myth. You did have militant orders such as the Poor Knights of the Temple of Solomon, et cetera, et cetera. But that idea kind of stuck with them, and so that was the trope that existed. But the game changed a lot in third edition. So in third edition, you had default clerics using simple weapons, but could use their god's favored weapons. So if your god liked big two-handed swords, your cleric could run around with a big two-handed sword. In third edition, clerics were actually a lot more powerful, maybe even overpowered, because their spell lists were larger. They had access to domain spells, so you could have them throwing some more wizardly spells around as well. I kind of skipped out on fourth edition, like a lot of people did. I think fifth edition strikes a nice balance. The cleric subclasses, which we'll talk about a bit later, really, give some options in terms of spell casting or combat ability. It would have been nice if each domain had both kind of ideas integrated into them as separate choices, but even so, there's a lot more flexibility now, and I think power-wise, they're in line with other players, and there's something to do every round, which is really the important thing for player enjoyment.
Yeah, I think with the different editions, like Cleric, I think is in a better position now than in the past. I mean, I know there's been a bit of a roller coaster, but I agree with you. I think it's in a pretty good position. Definitely could still be improved, but they're looking good. I almost look at them as the inverse of the Ranger. For me, the Ranger used to be much better than it is right now, and Cleric I think is the opposite. They're really getting up there on my list, at least. Now, Sarah, you have what's the word for it? An obsession with clerics, and I'm really curious to get your take as to, number one, what is it about clerics that you love so much, and number two, how has that kind of progressed for you through the different editions?
I mean, obsession is a pretty strong word. I'd like to, maybe like a passion bordering on I'm your number one fan kind of thing, but obsession's a little strong. Actually, what I absolutely love about clerics is that they're so important to a party, and they have like both this ability to both heal and support, and they can also fight. And they're kind of like a jack of all trades, right? You can play that support, you can lean in on support, you can step up front and like swing that mace, or you can, if you are leaning heavily towards some of the damaging magic, you can also just sit back and cast. So they really are rounded in that way, and they're hated, and I don't understand that, but and that might be part of why, because I'm an underdog kind of girl too. I'll lean towards the underdog. But one of the biggest things for me is I absolutely love it when faith comes into roleplay, or a strong stance against it, or not having one. I feel like it adds more dimension to characters, because it tends to be a blueprint that informs their decision making and their actions, and it'll always also create certain crises of character. For example, maybe you are committed to keeping, all the good stuff, like everyone who's good, everyone who's innocent alive, and then your party, kills someone who's an NPC, and then they, they find out it was a good guy. Like, that's going to probably impact you more, and it's going to probably impact your interaction with the rest of the group. So, I don't know. I love them. They just bring so much more nuance, I feel. And not that another class couldn't do it. It's just I don't usually see, unless you're a paladin, people playing another like faith or some rich texture of like, this is my philosophy and this is the way I'm going to live, other than like alignment related. So.
Well, I think the nice thing about cleric and similar to paladin and probably warlock is that there are external forces at play here that are guiding your decision making, and like you said, that sets you up for some interesting choices to be made that might conflict with whatever your belief system is, or if you're a warlock, what your patron wants. And I think that's the benefit when it comes to role playing, is that you have yet another variable that you've thrown into the mix to really make things chaotic. And that is interesting. And I think the reason people shy away from it is because, not many people have experience with support characters, or they don't like the idea of not being, this DPS machine, or on the front line, or casting these horrible like evocation spells that obliterate everything. They look at healing.
My cleric in our other campaign does that.
Yeah.
Cleric can be that.
Cleric can do anything now, but I think the reputation of the cleric
historically
has always been, I sit back and I heal people when they go down, which it's not true, but it's for some reason stuck, and I'm not sure why. Like, hopefully there's a resurgence. Do you think there's going to be?
I think if enough people play it.
Yeah, and I think also like part of this was also reinforced like by video games and stuff. Like you had to have a healer in the party, and it was always like like I played a healer in World of Warcraft, and I had no problem finding people who wanted me to join their parties for like different adventures. But it was not because I was an awesome player. It was because I had the heal. So, and because nobody else was really playing this particular role, and I understand wanting to like do damage and be the person up front who like makes a difference with the monster to hold the aggro or whatever it is that you want to do. That's gonna maybe feed that sort of like that power fantasy that a lot of us have. But it's just one of the best parts, and Matt, tell me if you've actually experienced this, but one of the things I really love is the strategy that you have to sort of plan out. If I heal this person now, is that going to get us through another round with everyone alive? Or do I take a chance at trying to turn like a bunch of these undead and risk like maybe failing those saves, and then that person's not healed and they die anyway? So you have like the strategy too that you have to kind of keep in mind. And I think it's a little different, like especially when you're playing like a fighter. You tend to be like, well, do I go at it from this angle? Do I protect this person? But it's not really, you're always at the front. You're always swinging. You're not really...
I swing my sword.
Yeah. So, I don't know, Matt, did you find that when you were playing your...
So I think healing and control kind of... So D&D has a slight problem with healing, which is that healing doesn't matter until a character goes down, generally. There's a couple of exceptions, but that's usually the case. So healing becomes tactical only when people are low on hit points. And then somebody's at like 3/4 of their hit points or half their hit points, it's less important. It's more a question of, are they going to go down? So the game theory revolves around the action economy. Now, other systems, as characters get injured and they start suffering penalties, then healing kind of has an additional importance. Basically, in D&D, generally the way it's been is if you are healing, you're usually doing in combat, you're usually doing something wrong unless it's to prevent someone from going down or to bring someone back up from being down. And that's a flaw in the system, I think. But
yeah, it is, and I don't think. I think it kind of hurt the cleric class a little bit because I think they've spent a good time with the different domains of making clerics interesting and powerful and everything. But when it comes to healing, I mean, I think we did an episode on that where it's just kind of a broken one within D&D, where your only usefulness to heal is when someone goes down, and the idea of, well, I'm a fighter and I can fight just as strong at one hit point as I can at my max hit point. I think other systems do a little bit better where it actually affects your ability to fight as you lose more and more hit points, which makes a little bit more logical sense. But healing is a tough one. I'm glad that clerics have a lot more control and other support functions, though. I mean, just when it comes to simple stuff like bless and stuff like that can really turn the tide of a battle.
Buffing. Yeah, buffing is big.
Absolutely. Well, hey, let's get into some questions for the week. Our first post that we're going to dive into comes from Reddit user Slavostan, who asks, how can my lawful good cleric fit in with a group of chaotic neutral players? Looking for some RP advice. There's no problem player to player, but I'm having a hard time seeing why my lawful good cleric would continue to tag along with a group of characters that has no problem killing innocent NPCs, stealing, etc. How should I RP my characters so that there's no major character conflict? Okay, so some cleric RP advice needed here. So I'll turn to you first on this, Sarah. How would you RP this lawful good character in a group of chaotic neutral, which I'm taking to mean like murder hobo? I mean, this is what it sounded like. Those kind of players. What would you do?
Okay, first of all, I need to know did Tom like send this in under a pseudonym? Because I know he was having problems with Andreas in our Avernus campaign, and it was pretty similar. So here's the thing. There's two things that need to happen. Either your character needs to find a way to work with this group, or you need a new character, because there's going to be so much chafing and so much infighting that it might not even make it a fun for everyone at the table or over the Zoom. So I would recommend that you sort of understand what's the angle of your particular god. What is your goal? Like, if it is to do good unto others, then examine the whole agenda of the party, and recognize that, one, people are gray, right? There's no absolute black and white, even, and in lawful, I think a lawful good person should at least be able to acknowledge this. And two, what is, if they're going to making headway towards doing good for the entire world, and it comes at the expense of these characters, maybe recognize that you need to be with them to help solve the bigger problem, and you may not like it, and you can also, like, you know, maybe censure them or set an example, or even show mourning for the losses, and obviously not condone it, but make it in a way where it's about your bigger mission with this group, and you have to suck it up. Like, you just joined the military with a bunch of people who, you know, are kind of hurting, you know, some of the people that you love or whatever. It can make it very interesting, I think, but it comes at you know, you just have to maybe reframe things so it's not so black and white. And I think that's one of the problems too with our alignments, is the old alignment system is just, I don't think anyone is absolutely in one area all the time. But what do you think,
agree.
Matt?
So this is a lesser version of the paladin problem. There's always a problem, and especially in previous editions, where cannot tolerate evil members in the party, and of course, like, the party's all evil, and then the paladin complains that they're violating his code of conduct. But I think actually, I think the poster may be looking at it from the reverse angle, because you don't, righteous people don't really need priests, right? You know, it's like preaching to the choir. So if you're actually, you know, you can actually make a plot point of, yeah, you're trying to save these souls, right? I mean, you are there to try to put them on the right path, right? I mean, if they are, you know, your normal murder hobo adventurers, and you're, you know, the cleric of lawful good god of bright shining, you know, society, you know, that you make it your mission to try to make them see the light, and, you know, you're there to kind of correct some of the horrible things they do, maybe after the fact. And you know, and again, I think lawful good is kind of a very broad kind of brushstroke. I'm not a huge fan of the alignment system. I think it's more important to clarify what makes your cleric lawful good. You know, is he defender of the innocent? You know, defender of civilization? Defender, you know, what it is that he believes in, and really try to either, you know, avert the worst of what the party does. You know, try to convince them to show the light, and maybe talk to your DM. Maybe it's a good idea to have an adventure where there's some real consequences for doing the morally wrong things, right? Because
like killing a king on top of a dragon turtle, right?
Right, or you know, like, let's say you raid a ship with supplies to, you know, heal a plague, right? I mean, that could have consequences down the line, right? And so you know, it's not a bad idea for the DM to be on board with realistically showing, right, in real life. Well, I won't say that the majority of humans are lawful good. There's enough law and enough good in human societies, because that's how a society becomes healthy and functions. So when people don't do that, societies tend to have problems. And so there's it's not just an abstract. There's a real reason that people behave in such a way and have those types of values. So showing the consequences of falling away from those values, or having a situation where the players have to deal with those consequences, could make the cleric's viewpoint a more relevant and germane one. Even if the other characters don't agree with it, they may at least say, well, all right, maybe he has a point.
No, that's a good perspective on that, and I'm a huge fan of consequences in the world based off the decisions that you make. I think that's a great kind of route to, you know, maybe talk to the DM about. You could also try flipping this. I mean, you're a lawful good cleric with these chaotic neutrals. What if instead of saving them, you play a character who's losing your religion, that's you losing your faith, and kind of what comes out of that? So maybe as this is going, it's that struggle of, you know, yes, I want to follow this faith, but, you know, my party is kind of leading me into this, and I'm starting to like it, and I'm starting to kind of fit in more and more with them, and what kind of story implications might that have that the DM can throw your way. So don't be afraid to go the opposite route, where it's a crisis of faith, and maybe the faith side is losing, and what do you do about it?
Oh my God, I just sat up in my chair. I'm like, oh God, I'm so into this story. Tell me more.
Well, hopefully for Slavostin, that gives you maybe some ideas that you can use. It is a tough position to be in. I feel for you. It's there's a lot of conflict that could come out of this, but also a lot of good story that you might be able to jump into. So hopefully that helps you out.
I have news here.
And the sound of Ralphie the News Goblin can mean only one thing. It is time for Potomac RPG News.
I love you, Ralphie.
So a couple big news items this past week. First up was the release of some new Unearthed Arcana from Wizards, featuring a new subclass for the Monk and the Ranger, both with a dragon theme to them. So that's interesting. Matt, we're going to start with the Monk here. After looking through this, what's your opinion of the Way of the Ascendant Dragon Monk?
So I like it quite a bit. I mean, like we mentioned a couple of podcasts ago, I think it's important that a class hold together thematically, and this is very thematic.
Mm-hmm.
I think the real power of this class is in the versatility of the energy types. So unlike a lot of the other dragon stuff that's out there for characters where you have to pick a dragon subspecies, here when you use your powers, you pick your energy type, right? And that versatility is potentially very powerful. Whether it's the damage on your unarmed attacks, the breath weapon, which you can use, which is really good for taking out mooks. Whether it's the flight's good, or you have this ability to, the 11th level ability for the aura, which gives resistance and an energy-based counterattack. In all cases, you can pick the type of damage, and that is potentially very useful, especially if you have another player who can create vulnerabilities to damage types, or you have another class that you're using that you're multi-classed with, like the Tempest Cleric, which I'll talk about later, where you can knock people back when you do lightning damage. Here it's like, all my unarmed strikes are lightning, flurry of blows, and then you send like 10 guys flying. So it has a lot of applications just for that reason, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. At first, when I first took a look at this, I was looking at Draconic Discipline or Disciple at 3rd level, and I saw, like, is the different damage type all that important? Like, are there times where we run into a case where we suddenly have to change up our dragon type or our damage type that often? I mean,
it depends on the campaign. I mean, our campaign, we haven't really had to deal that much with elemental resistances, but some campaigns I could see that happening quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, and also with and I saw about the charisma, the intimidation or persuasion check, being able to use your reaction to re-roll the check. I thought that was pretty cool. I like that.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it's not a strength of clerics in general, since they're not usually monks, charisma skill-based guys, but still it's a nice to have.
Yeah. But as we get down through with Breath of the Dragon and Wings Unfurled, there's some pretty cool benefits coming out. I mean, just the ability to fly.
Even if only for short bursts, is still pretty useful.
That's huge. Well, Sarah, how about you? What are you looking at with this monk? Anything interesting?
I think it's a really interesting addition to the monk class. But I don't play monks like that often, so I can't really weigh in with any sort of authority on this, other than it sounds really cool and I definitely try it. I do think that the changing the damage type could be interesting in different situations, especially when you figure out that one thing isn't working. So that's convenient. But like you guys said, I don't know that it'd be that often, at least in our experience with our campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, then again,
yeah.
I mean, we're in Avernus right now, and with this resistance,
Lightning is good against devils.
yeah, with this resistance to fire, and my character not kind of realizing that, player knowledge versus character knowledge, I'm like hitting shit with fire, and it's not doing a whole lot. And yeah, I could see some usefulness for switching up the damage type. But yeah, we'll see what comes of it. It's always good to see a new monk subclass. I have yet to play a monk. Same with you, right, Sarah?
Yeah. I don't know. One of us will have to try
I
it.
haven't played a monk either.
Oh, you haven't? Wow, we are experts in the field.
I think Ben's the only one who's played a monk so
well, Nick
far.
has too. He played.
Nick.
Nick has too. That's right.
Yeah. So
that's right. Nick and Ben have played. Yeah.
Well, and it's always interesting to get, as you said last night, Matt, the other one half of Dungeons and Dragons into the mix, which is the dragon, where it's nice to see that kind of have some kind of thematic quality within the monk class. But let's move over to the ranger here with the Drake Warden. What are you seeing on this side, Matt, with the Drake Warden?
So this is definitely a pet class. So the ranger. So the ranger, there's been the beast warden, but I think 5e's kind of struggled a little bit with the animal companion approach. The Drake looks like a more powerful animal companion than the ones that they've kind of had out previously. Which may make it okay. It's kind of hard to say without playing it. But I mean, it looks like the Drake is a bit tougher than some of the other pets out there. So I think on top of the Rangers kind of a weird class because they're baseline weak, but they have some really situationally very useful abilities. I think if you add the Drake to that, it gives you more options. But I haven't played a ranger either, and I haven't played with a pet, so I'm not really sure how it works out in actual gameplay.
Well, I mean, from the DM side of things, I can say for certainty, pets make things more difficult. Oh my God. Like everyone wants one. They all want it to do cool stuff. And it's just yet another initiative tracker or marker on the initiative tracker. It can be, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I grew up reading the Salvatore novels with, Dritz and his, what was the Panther's name? I forget.
I don't remember.
Yeah, whatever it was. But yeah. I mean, I was a kid. Like, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. But when it comes to actual play style with that pet, boy, it can get a little clunky. But from a player side, the idea of having basically a sidekick in animal form.
I mean, they've streamlined the initiative because the way it works is you command it with your bonus action.
Yeah.
That's how pets work in 5e, which isn't a bad thing. But again, like I'm not sure how we haven't done. I don't think at our table we've done this. So I don't think we've done any pets at our table. No. So I don't think we really have much of an experience with how pets play out in 5e. So it's kind of hard for me to judge, the power level of it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's cool that we have the pet option, though. I mean, I know that we do anyway as a ranger, but to have something a little bit more powerful that can, come like which level is it? It can either fly at 7th level, fly or swim. To be able to like customize your pet a little bit based on the need that you have when you summon it, that can be really fun. Especially if you're trying to both of you herd like a particular enemy together. And also it looks like you also get some benefits as well as a ranger, so you can like work in tandem. As well as just choose what you need for the moment. And I think in a smaller group, because we have a really, really large group, I think in a smaller group having a pet probably would not be as annoying.
I agree. But when it comes to the class itself, I gotta admit, I agree with you, Matt, that this is a pet class. That is all about the pet. There's not a whole lot given to the player themselves. You get the resistance at level 3, level 3, you get resistance. But then down at level 7 with the Bond of Fang and Scale, that's where you get the resistance. I'm sorry. You have to wait till level 11 to get an action where you can exhale a 30-foot cone of damaging breath, or you can cause your Drake to do it. Well, I mean, outside of
Makes
that,
more sense for the Drake to do it.
yeah, it does make more sense for the Drake to do it. But this is all about what the pet can do. There's not a
Yeah.
whole lot of benefits. So it's almost like instead of having a more powerful character, you're getting two mediocre characters to play with, and that's what that kind of bothers me about it. I think this is an opportunity. We talked earlier about off the show about teamwork kind of sets that in things like Pathfinder and whatnot, where maybe if they can start coming up with ways where the Drake, where the pet and the ranger together are able to do something using teamwork, I think that might be a good route to go with that, rather than just, oh, I have this powerful pet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we haven't really had too much experience with the pet classes, and so I think it's hard to say, does it slow it down, does it not slow it down? Is having two characters that are top power level as good as having one, or better than having one that is top level? Like, I'm not sure, and I just it's hard to evaluate really without playing this one, I think.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, looks like we're all on the fence on these, but we'll see the different iterations that come out of these subclasses, see if they make it into any canon. But the next bit of news that we want to cover, we got an image this week of the table of contents for Tasha's Cauldron, which was pretty cool. There's not a ton of info, but it definitely got people talking. Sarah, is there anything in this table of contents that leaps out at you as something you find interesting?
I want to know what group patrons are all about. Like, is this for our entire group? And what happens if someone's being good and the other and someone else in the group is just being a really, really crappy sort of representative of this patron? Like, how does that pan out for the entire group? And I'm not even sure if that's exactly what it is. It's just group patrons and stuff like that. I'm assuming it's a little bit like the sorcerer class. You have something is giving your group power, but yeah, I want to know, like, what happens if we're not all on the same page or doing what we're supposed to be doing, and how that plays out within the group. So that was definitely one of the things that stood out to me.
Some cool stuff. I mean, like, obviously we see some of the subclasses that were in UA form now becoming official, which is nice. I see Soul Knife down there, Phantom down there for the Rogue class, a few others. Circle of Stars made it in. Hopefully it's very similar
it looks like there's some stuff I haven't seen before. Cleric of the Peace domain. Peace D&D. I don't know who would want to play that.
Who would want to play Peace in D&D? Yeah, absolutely. Well, and along those lines, one thing I found interesting over in Chapter 4 there with the Dungeon Master's tools, parlaying with monsters. I'm not sure exactly. Now, it's only 2 pages long. I'm not sure what that means, but it does kind of give me an idea of, okay, are they actually going to work things out where you can avoid conflict in some way, and what that means? Like, are you getting that sense? Do you guys think that's the route they're going?
I think so. I mean, in second edition, I mean, there was kind of this thing where, like, parley was an actual option. No one ever used it, but there was an actual option. And if you remember, like, even the gold box games, like Pool of Radiance, right? You run into a group of kobolds, and there was like an option to parley with the kobolds. Usually they ask for like money or food, and then they leave you alone. Yeah. But the idea kind of exists, and I guess if they're going for a cleric of peace who's like not gonna kill things, I don't know.
Maybe they bring peace through
superior firepower.
Yeah, and holding people and like all this, like, maybe not aggressive ways of just calming the combat.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hope it's not the route of, okay, pay me 500 gold and we don't have to fight kind of nonsense. I think I hope it's more along the lines of maybe using that parlay for additional quests, or some kind of service that's done, or some kind of story element that can be kind of wrapped in, rather than the kind of bandits stop you, on the edge of the wood. They demand that you hand over your weapons. What do you do? Kind of like that I think is a video game nonsense. I'd really like if they are actually going to go that route, which don't know how much you can do in 2 pages within the book here, but I hope it's a bit more story based. Matt, how about you? What's standing out to you?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I mean, some of the magic items might be neat, but really, I think it's the dungeon master tools that stick out. Sidekicks. I mean, that sounds fun. Target boy, go disarm that trap. It's like a lot of fun. But really, it's just all this other stuff. I mean, supernatural regions can give really some cool ideas and magical phenomena. I think those things. Oh, mimic colonies. Oh God, that looks fantastic.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's like, oh look, comfy chair. Oh, it's like, the whole house is a mimic. I mean, it adds. I mean, we've had a lot of fun with mimics in our campaigns, and I think mimics, the ecology of the mimic is sort of a really unmined area. And so that fits, even though it looks like it's only 1 page, that has, I think, a lot. I mean, you could probably do even a whole source book on mimics if you really want to. So I think some of the DM stuff in there really looks very, very, appetizing.
Yeah, I'm looking down here, and I wish we would have had Tasha's. We have under natural hazards, we have falling into water and falling onto creature. It's nice that they're trying to put some mechanics behind those two, because in our last adventure we had a couple people fall into the water, and as a DM it's kind of hard to figure out, okay, how do we make this kind of a skill-based check of some kind and that kind of stuff. It'll be nice to have that codified. One thing I'm not happy to see is down on the page 171 with the puzzles and the puzzle handouts. Don't get me wrong, puzzles are fun, but I think it's a prime example of player versus character knowledge. It doesn't matter if your character is a dumbass with 8 intelligence, but if you as a player are smart enough to figure this puzzle out, it doesn't make sense within the game. When in season 1, Finbin was a dumb halfling, and yet I was like, oh, let's figure out this puzzle. Finbin can't do that shit. He's a dumb halfling. He can't even speak or write. Like, how is he solving puzzles all of a sudden? So I'm not too pleased about that development.
Also, there's like 18 pages of puzzles, so it makes me wonder.
Well, my guess is each of those they're probably visual. Like, I think the puzzles, they probably have visual things in each of they probably take a lot of explanation.
Yeah,
so
but it feels more like a corporate team building exercise.
Well, that's good for Acquisitions Incorporated, right?
That's true. Well, if anyone out there is interested in taking a look, Wizards has the Unearthed Arcana up. I don't know where I got this image. I think I found it on Twitter or something, but I'll put something in the show notes so people can jump to it, check it out, and look forward to when Tasha's comes out for real. But for right now, we're going to take a step out. Stick around though, we'll be right back after the break.
As any tabletop role player would know, coffee is an essential commodity for those 4-hour sessions we all go through. And a great place to get that coffee is foundfamiliar.com. Found Familiar is a couple of people with a passion for coffee creation and D&D, and they've teamed up with favorite artists from all around the world to bring specialty grade coffee that celebrates the creativity sparked by Dungeons & Dragons and other TTRPGs. Use the coupon code Potomac RPG, all one word, at checkout for 10% discount on your purchase. That's at foundfamiliar.com. And with that, let's get back to the show.
How about another question? This post comes from Reddit user Astral Canoeist, who asks, Cleric Party Balance. I'm running a one-shot for my party to give our usual DM a week off. I'm usually a player, but have DM'd in the past. My usual DM has got the party excited to try a 6 cleric party, and I'm really just wondering if there's anything special to take into account in the balancing of encounters for 6 clerics. All right, Sarah. So it's a 6 cleric party, pretty insane. What is your advice to keep things balanced here? How do you make it a challenge for a party like this, or make it interesting, or anything?
That is a party that I would love to be a part of, Astral Canoeist. So if you need an extra player, invite me. So tactically keeping this balance is going to be really hard. Because like I said, the clerics in 5e can be jacks of all trades or janes of all trades. So you could have people who are the fighters, and then you have the magic casters, and then the people running support and healing. And I think that it would be really, really important to do something where the other team or the enemies can regenerate, because they're going to be healing. And I also think that if they're a good party or like they lean good, confuse them with maybe people who may or may not be an enemy involved. We just dealt with a bunch of doppelgangers in Adam's game, and led to some confusion, because you don't want to kill an innocent in that situation. Unfortunately, it did happen. But I think that adding that layer to where there's just like they're second guessing themselves, or they're using a hold spell instead of something to absolutely dispatch something, just to be on the safe side, because they don't want to kill someone that's really important, or that is just innocent. I think that could help thwart the ease of certain areas and just keep them on their toes. Other tactical decisions, I'm going to throw it over to Matt, because he's he's definitely more into the mechanics, so he might be able to give some additional advice.
Yeah,
well, there's no such thing as unbalanced characters, only unbalanced players and unbalanced DMs. But actually, I think it can work. But there are a couple of things to keep in mind. Clerics may or may not have heavy armor, but in general, this is going to be a high AC party, but probably low in the physical attack category. You don't have fighters or rangers going, so so from a physical standpoint, the melee attacks aren't going to be as high as if you have fighters in the party. What you may have to deal with is a high amount of healing, potentially some high damaging spells, depending on the types of clerics. Mm-hmm. Likely weaknesses in the party are going to probably include a lack of rogue skills or abilities. So you may have a fair amount of knowledge type, lore type things, but you're probably not going to have much in the way of stealth or trickery or deception or anything like that. So that's actually an Achilles heel of the party. From an energy standpoint, they may lack some elements, so you may see some radiant fire and lightning, probably less cold, maybe dark, necrotic, it depends on the framework. But I think a more interesting question is, what's the ethical framework of these 6 clerics?
Yeah.
Are these 6 clerics that worship the same god? Are these 6 clerics that worship gods that have differing ideas on how the universe should be? I mean, there's a pretty big, story drive in there. So they may have same or different gods and different goals. One thing that you probably will have the party will have, which will be effective, is this will be likely a high buffing party, because it's all clerics. So there's going to be blesses, protection from evil, all kinds of things like that. So when they're buffed up, they're probably easily the equal of a fighting casting party. But when they're debuffed, they're probably a lot weaker, which means Dispel Magic is a potential killer to this party if you want to set up, a potential hard encounter. So those are kind of the dynamics that may come into play. A lot's going to depend on the subclasses that they choose, obviously.
Yeah, I really like this idea, though, and for some reason I get kind of a pulp comic image in my head, almost like if you ever saw that show The Preacher, and stuff like that, like just this almost a little Reservoir Dogs action going on too, in terms of these 6 clerics and kind of what the personalities are like, and they're actually going out and they're killing stuff or monsters, and you get this Tarantino vibe from the stuff that they're doing. I think it could be really cool, and I really love the idea of these different faiths or domains. How's the death cleric getting along with the peace cleric, and nature versus forge and stuff like that. Like, what are the dynamics there?
The death cleric,
could be really interesting, and like you said, Sarah, with the moral dilemmas you can put at the feet of these 6 clerics, it could could be cool. In terms of balance, I agree completely, Matt. They're not really going to be the big damage dealers usually, depends on the domain, but they're going to be buffed to all shit. So like you better have some monsters that can really take care of hurting them a good bit, because you got a bunch of healers, you got a bunch of buffs, they're going to be hard to take down.
Yeah, or maybe even like approach like one of them like outside a game or whatever, like with an NPC or something, and make them an offer to turn on their own in exchange for something that they really want for their deity, and see if you have them kind of working against a little bit. I mean, you can play with it. Obviously, that would lead to some bad will amongst the characters themselves if that was revealed, but. I don't know. You have 6 people, so maybe you can get one to kind of.
You need mature players for that kind of thing, though.
Yeah, you do.
Well, maybe make it a competition, like these 6 set out together in an effort to convert as many people to their domain as or their whoever they worship, but they have to work together in order to save these, and then they're trying to convince the populace to follow Lathander or Ilmater or whoever, and it's a competition between the 6 of them to see how many they can convert before the end of the adventure. That might, because it sounds like this is going to be short term, so you're not going to be able to get too deep into this, but there's some ideas there. So hopefully Astral Canoeist, that gives you some thoughts to ponder as you come up on this. Would love to hear how this ends up turning out. I mean, 6 clerics, right?
Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool. So we would love to hear back and see how that's going. But we've been talking about clerics today, and as with any class discussion, there's always the question of which subclass is best. So let's take a look at our favorite cleric subclasses in our segment, The Pick Is In.
Here we go now.
Welcome to The Pick Is In, where we give our expert and not so expert top ranked pick in whatever we're talking about. In today's episode, we'll be ranking the cleric subclasses. So here's how it'll work. We'll each give our top pick for a cleric subclass. Then we'll viciously defend our pick against each other, and our listeners will have the chance to vote on our Twitter poll which person they think had the best pick, or at least the best argument for it. You two ready?
Oh yeah.
All right, let's get into it. So looking at the subclasses for cleric, there's a lot of different domains to choose from. Matt, I'm going to turn your direction first. God, how many are there? There's like 12? Jesus.
There's going to be more with the Tasha side.
Yeah. There are a lot of options with cleric. Okay, so out of this immense list of possible subclasses, what kind of floats to the top of your list?
Oh, for me, that should be obvious. That's the Tempest cleric. I play. So as I said, I've been playing Arn Trulson, who is a Tempest cleric in one of our campaigns, and Tempest clerics are real monsters. They have, especially if they ever got their hands on a wand of lightning. So they have a lot of things going for them. First of all, you get proficiency with martial weapons and heavy armor. So even though you're not going to primarily be in melee, you have heavy armor. If you build the character right with a decent con, you are something of a tank. And on top of that, you are a pretty powerful spellcaster. So the Tempest domain bonus spells are really good in general. For example, even if first level you get Thunder Wave, which is usually dangerous for most little casters, but for a tank mage, you can just go up to guys and Thunder Wave them without worrying too much about being cut down in melee. I mean, you get Gust of Wind to counter gases, you get Call Lightning, which on the surface is great, and you have the other cleric spells like Healing and Spiritual Guardians and Spiritual Weapon to just pump out the damage. And all the class features are good. I mean, you can reaction damage guys with lightning or sonic damage, which are rarely resisted. Your channel ability, in addition to getting rid of undead, you can for every channel, which is 2 or even 3 times per day at the highest levels, you can maximize a lightning or thunder damage attack. So you hit somebody with a lightning bolt, that's 8d6, or if you 10d6 if you do it at higher levels, right? You just maximize it and you're like 60 damage to all those guys. It's like, wow, it's just incredible. And it's 6th level Thunderbolt Strike. When you do lightning damage to a large or smaller creature, you can push it up to 10 feet away from you. There's no check, there's no save, there's no contested thing. It's just, I did damage, you are going 10 feet in that direction off the cliff. But it's still very, very good. And you get, it's partially martial, so you get, the energy damage to your weapon attacks, which isn't amazing. And you can get, at highest levels, you get a fly speed. That time the game's over by that point. But like everything in this class is good. You're a tank mage, you can heal, you can blast, you can control. So you can do the cleric-y stuff when people want it, but when not, you can just lay down some pain. My only complaint, it works well if you mix it with a fighter or other martial class, if you want to be Thor, hit people with a thunder hammer. The only thing that the class really should have had, which it doesn't get Booming Blade as a cantrip, which, by default, which I feel like thematically it should have. And that's the one thing it's missing, but aside from that minor niggle, the class is just monstrously good.
Well, you make a good argument for it. Sarah, I'm going to turn over to you. What's your favorite out of this list?
Well, I just would like to, counter Matt real fast and just say drama. The Tempest, the Tempest domain is just drama. I'm totally going to try it sometime, but drama. My favorite, the one I stand is the Life domain. I know it is like, your default. Your default in a way for the cleric, but I mean, when you're healing, those slots go really, really fast, and at 2nd level, you get the chance to have that, use your channel divinity to get more healing that you can spread across the characters. So it's like a really, really good sort of last minute save when you are just strapped. You've been burning, slots. You haven't been able to rest, so you can still keep going and keep your party alive. And also you get, the usual buffs and stuff. And you can, at 6th level, you can also heal. The healing that you do on others will also heal you. So taking care of the cleric, the doctor caring for herself before helping, as well as helping others, like that is good. So now you don't have to worry about that moment where you're like, oh, do I heal myself or heal my party? And you're like, and usually, the cleric has to make that decision, right? It's probably better for the party in a lot of situations if the cleric stays up, but at the expense of a party member, like, you don't want to have to make that decision. So you get some healing back and stuff. So I'm sorry. I just feel like healing, like life all the way, preserve the good energy of all the people around you. And, you can still throw some spells that are going to do damage. You don't have to have a thunderstorm.
Yeah, well, no, that's a great idea. I'll admit, clerics aren't my specialty. Like, you guys have some great idea or opinions on what you think is the best. One that I've seen played that I thought was pretty cool was the Forge cleric.
Forge is good. I like Forge.
Pretty interesting abilities in there, depending on the type of campaign you're running. And honestly, I don't have a whole lot of specifics to mention about this. It's just this person played the Forge cleric, and they were just so good at what they were doing. It really impressed me and gave me kind of a appreciation for that specific domain. So that would probably be my uneducated pick. I love the Tempest
cool
domain.
If you combine it with Artificer, right? Because then you have all these
the
armor. It's like, we can make the armor up another +2.
Exactly. They'd be so badass. Yeah.
You're like Iron Man.
Exactly. Listeners, let's see what you think. We'll throw the poll up on Twitter and see who had the best argument for their top pick. For us, we're going to get into the last post of the week, which comes from Reddit user the Manderson93, who asks, "Want to play my first cleric and need a few tips. I'm starting my first ever cleric and I'm stuck on 2 different domains, War or Tempest. Some tips and ideas are appreciated." All right, so Matt, I wonder what you're going to say here, but all right. Character build question.
I'm not going to make this decision for him. I'll say that it's really a choice of tank versus tank mage. As I said before, I just love Tempest. I think it gives you so many options And you can just, not only can you blast the crap out of stuff, you can take a beating while doing it. If you walk into a tent that happens to be a mimic by yourself, right? Which actually happened, right? And you're like, the party can't get to you, right? Actually, character had enough firepower to literally blast his way out of that. That would have been like a kill for pretty much any of the other characters. Granted, it sapped him a lot for the next fight, but the point is the Tempest Cleric is just so monstrously powerful, especially outside during a storm. But the War Cleric's really good too. I mean, the War Cleric, I think the War Cleric is made for multi-classing with, a martial class, either fighter or ranger. And if you prefer melee, then the War Cleric is probably the way to go. Yeah. If you really want to play a not paladin but kind of paladin, warrior cleric who's getting stuck in with multiple attacks and buffed himself, and I think the War Cleric is really for that. Whereas the Tempest Cleric is the tank mage who can also fight if he has to. Now you can mix the Tempest Cleric with martial class 2 to get some of that and have a Thor-like character if you like. But I think it just depends on what if you prefer bashing or you prefer blasting. I think that's really how I would make that decision.
Well, bashing or blasting? What do you think, Sarah? What would you rather do?
Oh, I prefer to blast than to bash. Yeah, I'm definitely someone who plays more from the back or the borders and tries to keep people up. But yeah, I absolutely agree too with Matt. It's really just comes down to whether or not you want to hit some people in the face or shoot them in the face. So,
well, that's a question though, and maybe this is to you, Matt. For a first-time cleric player, though, are they going to have any trouble with Tempest Cleric, or do you think it's pretty easy?
I think the Tempest Cleric can be a little overwhelming in terms of the options. Because I know, I could use thunder, I can call lightning, when should I do? I think you need to really have some experience with spell casting and how to strategically cast to really maximize, and you can't maximize damage of the class, it's fun, but to maximize the damage of the class, just lightning maximize. But so I think for a starting point, I think maybe the war domain's a little more straightforward. But I think they're both really in the more powerful, side of the cleric pool, and it comes down to preference. I mean, if you want to melee, I think the war domain, especially mixed with the martial class, gives you that option. Because if you get 2 attacks from another class and then you use your ability to get the bonus action additional attack, it's you can get a lot of attacks early on, or at least burst, a lot of attacks when you need it. Which is pretty cool. Now, I feel like if you're playing a race or a class feature or feat that gives you access to cantrips and you want to do a booming blade, Tempest Cleric, then that's pretty cool also. But I just feel it should have gotten that as by default, and it didn't.
Well, we will send an angry letter to Wizards.
Hey, well, you want to play Thor? I mean, you've got to have booming hammer, just hit him with the war hammer, and now it's he's taking thunder damage.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess it does depend on what this player's background is, whether they've played mostly fighter classes or caster classes. Because that was the first thing that struck me just watching you play a Tempest Cleric, Matt, was that there was a lot of thinking involved in how you went about controlling that battlefield and where to place those spells and when. So if you at this point have done mostly frontline fighters or rogue type characters, might be better start with War Cleric instead of Tempest. But if you have some experience as a wizard, sorcerer, warlock, that kind of stuff, Tempest is I think we're all in agreement, definitely a great one to go with. So would love to hear what you end up going with, Manderson. Best of luck in your campaign. That's going to do it for us this week, though. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@potomacrpg.com. Check out our store for merch at teespring.com/stores/PotomacRPG. If you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/Potomac RPG. And lastly, you can follow us at Potomac RPG, all one word, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for being on today, Sarah and Matt. Had a great time. Thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew, and of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. So for the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Matt.
Till next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and
Never stop
free. I have been waiting my whole life for this episode.